So the world made a step that I think is potentially of great importance. And that is that at least in the Rio Plus 20 summit and in its outcome, the world's governments, backed by 60,000 strong of civil society, said we need a set of goals to guide us. We need, after the Millennium Development Goal period to 2015, a new set of sustainable development goals that will help to frame a path for survival, well-being, social inclusion, environmental sustainability for the planet. My experience with the Millennium Development Goals after the last 12 years of work on them and advising Kofi Annan and Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is that goals matter a lot. They help to orient us. They help to guide us. They help to remind us what's important. When I see the Millennium Development Goals taught in schoolrooms, studied by university students around the world, and guiding the work of governments, this, to my mind, is proof that we need these guideposts, these agreed ideas to help us through. And I might close by referring to one more anniversary that also points to the idea of goals. Javier talked about the 10th anniversary of 9/11 this past year as he was visiting. And I think that another crucial anniversary is the 50th anniversary that we have just passed this past week, and a period of 50th anniversary that will be with us through next September, and that is the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was one of the defining events of this institution, where the UN played a key role, and where the peril of the planet in a different way was unfolded, of course, more vividly than any time before or after in history. The world saved itself. Really, President Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev saved the world after a lot of missteps by pulling back from the brink 50 years ago last week, by defusing what was a crisis that almost led to annihilation. And during the ensuing months, really until the end of President Kennedy's life, until his assassination in November the next year, he pursued peace as a leader like no other in our time. And he launched a campaign for human survival, in fact. And as Gillian Sorensen here, one of UN leaders, knows well, Ted Sorensen worked with President Kennedy to draft one of the greatest statements about peace ever made in modern times, a great speech in June 1963, my favorite of all time. But President Kennedy said something very important in that speech, among 100 important things that he said in that speech. He said, by defining our goal more clearly, by making it seem more manageable and less remote, we help all people to see it, to draw hope from it, and to move irresistibly toward it. By defining our goal more clearly. In 1963, President Kennedy defined the goal of peace more clearly in the context of a partial nuclear test ban treaty, the first major agreement reached between the United States and the Soviet Union on arms control since the end of the Second World War. President Kennedy defined the goal precisely, carefully, led an effort that was vital. Leadership was essential given all of the hardliners on both sides, all of the doubters, all of those who believed that cooperation never could be achieved. He led the effort, but he told the American people how he would do it, by defining the goal more clearly. That's really our challenge today. We have to define our goal of human survival and flourishing more clearly. We have to take sustainable development at the center of our purpose, meaning that we put human well-being and prosperity, social inclusion, and environmental sustainability together. That's the meaning of sustainable development. We should enunciate a clear set of goals for what this means in practice, what governments at all levels need to do, what cities need to do, what companies need to do, what each of us in our lives needs to do, what universities need to do, and thereby help to orient us in the way forward. There has been a great myth that has been the most devastating myth of our politics of modern times, and that is that the rich can somehow excuse themselves from the public. That is the idea that when you close the gates behind your gated community, the climate will stay out. Or that your children will go to school not on planet Earth, but on some other planet. And that you can just keep yourself safe from all of this. Where did the storm hit? It hit at Wall Street. It hit at the very center of the global economy. There is no safety for anybody unless everybody is part of the safety and the solution. And I think that this is what the hurricane taught us. And President Kennedy made what I think in that most wonderful set of observations about how to solve problems, the most important point of all. And that is that we really are in this fully together. Of course, he said this in a way which goes down in history as the most beautiful lines I think that a president has spoken. He said, "So let us not be blind to our differences, but let us also direct attention to our common interests and to the means by which those differences can be solved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air, we all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal." I would say that we have 4 critical things that we need to do at least. One is we do need to decarbonize the energy system. And there are, by the way, of course, ways to use fossil fuel in a decarbonized way as well, so-called carbon capture and sequestration. And I firmly believe we need to test that, promote it, look at that actively to see what can be done. Second is we need to make our food systems resilient. This is the biggest imminent threat. When we lose crops in the United States, in Ukraine, in Russia, as we have been in recent years, food prices have doubled in real terms. The poor are getting hammered. There's worse to come. The third is we need to educate and keep healthy every child on this planet. It's a basic idea. There is no society so rich that it can afford not to invest in any child. Any child without an education is a burden on society and on the world, and a tragedy for that child. We need universal early childhood development, universal education, at least through the secondary level. This is the most powerful single investment in the world by far in human decency, in equality, in opportunity, and in safety. And population. We are 7 billion people now. We reached 7 billion last Halloween Day, according to the wonderful UN population clock. They even had the time of day. But we reached 7 billion 12 years after we had reached 6 billion. And we are on a trajectory right now to reach 8 billion by 2024, 9 billion by 2044, and 10 billion by 2084, according to what's called the medium fertility forecast of the UN Population Division. The world cannot take it. Even more, all of these new net increases of population are occurring in the world's poorest places. Those are the places with the highest fertility rates. Sub-Saharan Africa is on a trajectory right now in that medium forecast to go from 856 million people in 2010 to 3.3 billion people by 2100. Don't think for a moment that Africa would stand a chance to have a decent quality of life, to escape from poverty, to preserve what is the most wondrous natural ecology and wildlife in the world, to have the values of African communities with 3.3 billion people in a context of climate change. It could never be done. It means a collision course with the planet and with the escape from poverty. So I think, Enzo, if you're suggesting that we absolutely need to face this issue, it's without question central. And what we have experienced, by the way, in the work in the Millennium Villages is that poor people know it. They want contraception, they want access to family planning, they want to be able to reduce the size of their families, they want their fewer number of children to be better educated, healthier, nutritious, staying alive. But whenever in the Millennium Villages we say it's family planning day, contraception day, come and get an opportunity for long-term contraceptives, for an implant or IUD implantation. Hundreds of families, and it doesn't matter whether it's Christian communities, Muslim communities, people want access to these basic health services right now. So the opposition is not social. The opposition is not cultural. The opposition is really not religious, because how many priests and bishops have said to me, "We know, just don't make me say it," all over the planet. Because poor people need a decency of life, and they can't afford to give their children that decency if there are 8 children in the family in a rural, impoverished village of Ethiopia or northern Nigeria or northern Ghana or Mali or any other place. So this is part of the solution. And the fact of the matter is we need to do all of this. And we're not doing almost any of it right now. Because sometimes we work on least common denominator, which is don't do anything that there's some opposition someplace stated. And on climate change, this has paralyzed us for 20 years now. We're afraid of the lobbies, we're afraid of the uncertainties. The fact of the matter is there is a way ahead. There are technologies, there are ways to move forward that are sustainable and compatible with economic development and growth. They include, by the way, both fossil fuels and renewable energy sources, and these need to be worked out and seriously implemented. We need to define our goals more clearly and then work to achieve them.